But that's not how Conor fights. Conor is a counter fighter. Conor is a defensive fighter. And he looks fantastic at it. Did you guys see him fight Eddie Alvarez? Just to bring up a recent fight. Conor waited. He baited Eddie in. Eddie threw his punches. Boom. Conor saw his opportunity and hit him. So Conor, as a counter fighter, is taking on the greatest counter fighter out there to use the argument that he's going to go out and attack him and put him in a corner and bully him. That's just not how he fights. I don't know what that's being based around. And when you're trying to form an opinion, I'm open to all opinions because I've got mine too and I'm passionate about it. But guys, I'm wrong all the time. I always give you guys a passionate opinion and I really believe it. And I do my due diligence. I do my research. I study the fights and I come away with an analysis. But 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in the world of combat. There are variables, there are intangibles, there are unforeseens. I recognize all of those, and I think that's what makes this such an exciting fight. All I ask is that when somebody disagrees with me and they think that Conor is going to win this fight, I just ask that you provide me evidence as to why. Not because you saw some interview that you enjoyed and not because you saw him win an MMA. Give me some kind of evidence as to how a southpaw counter fighter that's got a little bit of size and a little bit of reach. Show me a fight in history where that worked out in his advantage. If you can do it, if you can point to a fight, go, actually something similar to this that happened. And here's the result. And here's the techniques that fighter used. That's really valuable evidence. I'd love to hear it. But for now, we're faced with the fact that we got a guy who's never lost a professional boxing taking on a guy who's never done professional boxing. We're faced with the fact that 2 counter fighters are fighting. We're faced with the fact that to make the argument that Conor hits harder than Floyd, boy, that's a ridiculous one right out of the gate. And some people believe Conor hits harder because the last few people Conor's hit have gone down and the last few people Floyd has hit have not. You're misinterpreting the data. Floyd is throwing punches at guys that are great at slipping and rolling with and dealing with punches. Conor is throwing punches at guys who aren't great at it. They're very good. But they have to also focus some of their time on the grappling, on the submission, on the conditioning, on the strength, on the weight cutting. They're not great at it in comparison to the guys that Floyd is throwing punches at. You can bet your ass every single punch out there, from a jab to a hook to a cross to an uppercut, Floyd throws harder and punches significantly harder than Conor does. And he's also used to throwing it at harder targets. As much as this sounds like a commentary against Conor, you guys know what camp I'm in. I'm cheering for Conor. But when I hear a case made for him, I got to hear something more. I've got to hear a better argument than Conor wins because he's bigger. I got to hear a better argument than the falsehood that Conor wins because he hits harder, or that he's going to bully Floyd and corner him. When's the last time Floyd's been cornered? It's happened. It has. Zab Judah cornered him. Miguel Cotto cornered him about 6 times in the fight. It has happened. But I'd ask you, when's the last time? And how did it work out? When those guys begin teeing off. When Miguel Cotto, who hits as hard as any boxer out there pound for pound, any combat athlete in the world, did tee off on Floyd. Did he hurt him? Did he put him down? Did he even win that round? These are relevant questions that need to be asked when you're... Guys, I had a long conversation today with Brett Okamoto. I did his podcast, and we somehow got on the topic of Demetrius Johnson and what's going on at 125 pounds. And he was asking me some of the differences between Bellator and the UFC. I think that's how we got started on that. And that's always a hard question for me. I get asked that a lot, but that's a tough one. It's a tough one just because there's more similarities than there are differences. They're both governing bodies. They're both their own entities. But when it comes down to the sport and being a participant in an athletic competition, we follow the unified rules. So it's the same thing. We have the same weight classes. We got the same rules. We deal with the same commissions. I don't see a lot of differences. Somehow we got on that topic, and I did say, it does seem there's a phenomenon where you hear the athletes in Vegas talking out a lot, whether it's over the Reebok deal or just whatever happened, but you do hear a lot of that. You don't hear that over at Bellator. And to make sense of that, I won't begin to try, but it is one of the differences without being able to put my finger on it. That's something that I have observed. And we started talking about 125 pounds and Demetrius Johnson specifically, and the fact that he's unhappy and he's come out and spoke about it. And I will just tell you this. I feel that there is something coming down on that division. We saw the 145-pound women's champion stripped earlier today. I don't believe Demetrius is going to be stripped, but I do believe there is something coming down with that division. I'll tell you, I'm out in the Northwest, and the UFC has a show planned for August in Seattle, which is about 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours from my front door. I'm not hearing any chatter on that show, and I'm starting to come of the mind, and that's supposed to be headlined by Demetrius. To remind you, he's from Seattle. He was supposed to headline that card. That's where he and TJ were supposed to fight. That's where he believes he's going to fight with Ray Borg. I can just tell you, being close to that proximity and in that arena, knowing how on sale date works, knowing the buzz that I was feeling all the way in Portland because they will market to us as well, it has not begun. And while that show is still a couple months away, I can tell you we're still within the window that an on-sale date would at least be announced, if not already on sale. We are within that 2-month, 8-week window. I don't know that that show is going to happen, but I can tell you, if that show does not happen, if that show is canceled, if Demetrius Johnson is not on that card and headlining that event as planned, I do not believe personally that we will see him fight in the UFC again. I do not know if we will see any flyweight fight in the UFC again. I'm keeping my eye on that show. I am all for opportunity. But Dana White couldn't have been much clearer when he said we've been looking at cutting that division for about 3 years now. And when it starts at the top, when the biggest draw of the division is your champion, and he's not drawing, and then he's not willing to take the fights that you believe internally could change that, could shift some momentum and help to put some fire in that division, I believe things are going to be looked at. We talked about that on Brett's show. I've heard you guys on Twitter. I hinted about it. I didn't say as much as I just said right now, and I'm still holding back a little bit. But if that show doesn't take place, if Demetrius Johnson does not headline Seattle, you can be all but assured you will not see him in the UFC again at 125 pounds. Guys, I got a lot going on. It's been very busy. When I was at ESPN, one thing I would like to say, I was at ESPN, I met a group of heroes, a group of soldiers that were all wounded in battle. And they were out there with comedian Jon Stewart, and they were going around and they were doing a tour. And in fact, when I was leaving, they were about to leave and come up to New York too. They're going to be on Good Morning America tomorrow. Jon Stewart is working with this group. I've always respected and appreciated Jon Stewart as a entertainer, as a very intelligent man. I've seen him step out of his comfort zone, go on things like the O'Reilly Factor, stand toe-to-toe, not be afraid to give his opinion, and be able to support it with facts and evidence. Regardless of ideology, you have to appreciate somebody that has evidence and reason for believing what it is they believe. When I met him today, my one and only time meeting him and seeing what he was doing, and I have an even newfound appreciation and respect for him. I think he deserves that to be said about him, so we're saying it now.